Wait. Wait. I just have to share real quick something I found out this week. So, do you remember Godzilla jumping and punching the air in Invasion of Astro Monster? Turns out he was actually doing the shit, which is a pose popularized by a character named Yami from the manga Ozomatsu-kun. The pose was wildly popular in Japan during the 1960s, to the point that even John Lennon did it during a trip to the country. Eiji Tsubaraya and Ishiro Honda just thought it would be funny for Haruo Nakajima to perform it in the movie. And thus was born one of the greatest moments in Godzilla history. Alright, that was it. Moving on. It was 1995. 3 Stars Godzilla had finally entered pre-production. Meanwhile, Toho's last 2 flicks starring the character had failed to perform as well as the 2 before those. All these factors contributed in the studio's decision to give the King of the Monsters a break of a decade or so while the Americans did their thing across the Pacific. But they couldn't just retire Godzilla like that. Oh no, he deserved a proper send-off. A movie to enter history. And what better way to do so than to pull the most overused publicity stunt of the 1990s and kill your main character. Godzilla vs. Destroyah was highly advertised as the death of Godzilla. There were funeral services for the character, statues erected in his homage, and an overall outcry from the fans, outraged with the idea. Of course that the series was not going to conclude with this film, but Toho did everything he could to convince people it was. Akira Ufukube was even brought back to score one last movie for the franchise, this time for real. According to him, it was fitting for the composer to be present in Godzilla's death, as he was there for his birth. To tie the whole saga nicely, from the very start the filmmakers knew they had to go back to the beginning. So the first idea for this movie was for Godzilla to face a ghost of the first monster from the original 1954 film. And then they realized it would have been the 3rd flick in a row with Godzilla fighting a clone of himself, and they gave up on the idea altogether. Of course that the plot that they come up with later still relied heavily on elements from the first movie, so they were still going to wrap things up that way.
What's that?
Godzilla is dying, and this is not just a convenient Deus Ex Machina. His heart, which acts as a powerful nuclear reactor for the creature, has entered meltdown. Soon he is going to explode, and possibly take all life on Earth with him. Since attacking the monster directly would only accelerate the whole process, the only hope of stopping it is using the same weapon that killed Godzilla 40 years before, the Oxygen Destroyer. But how so, since Dr. Serizawa destroyed his research before taking the secrets of the invention to the grave with him? Enter Dr. Idrin. His expertise on the subject of oxygen makes him the most suitable individual to try and recreate Serizawa's invention. While many, including the now ancient Emiko Yamane, this is the same actress by the way in her last role before passing a few years later, believe that the Oxygen Destroyer is a curse and should remain out of human hands, the G-Force is convinced they have no other choice but to make it. So Ijin collects soil samples from a tunnel right under the original Godzilla's resting place for study. Apparently though, not everything that was affected by the destroyer was killed. Something might have survived and thrived without oxygen, a prehistoric microorganism from when the Earth didn't have any of the gas in its atmosphere. Whew, that's a lot of setup. I wonder what Miki Saegusa is up to. Alright, baby's dead. I mean, not really, but no one can find him, so everyone just assumed the worst. As it turns out, Miki's powers are waning and she can't sense the creature anymore. And now this is the last time we'll be seeing her. Let's put Miki Saegusa on the spotlight, shall we? I found a digital shrine for the character. No, for real. It has a compilation of pictures and fanfics of her, a summary of Miki's adventures in the franchise, and a small bio on her actress, Megumi Odaka. You might think this is a weirdly specific obsession, but let's be honest here. Which other character in the franchise has appeared in a total of 6 movies? This woman made history and helped to establish a strong sense of continuity within the Heisei Era thanks to a never-evolving character. Yeah, you heard that right. Miki had development. That's a lot more than you can say about most characters. As for her actress, most sources describe Odaka as a teen idol, which means she started acting at 12 years old and released a handful of music albums in her late teens. After participating in something called Touhou Cinderella Audition, she was cast as Saegusa-chan in Godzilla vs. Biollante. Of note is the fact that all the winners of the contest so far have appeared in a Godzilla movie in some capacity or another. Also of note is the fact that Mrs. Odaka had never watched a Godzilla flick prior to starring in one, and that she was scared of the Biogoji suit. After Godzilla vs. Destroyah, she pretty much retired from acting, although Megumi sometimes appears in plays and, of course, Godzilla fan conventions. And now, for the sake of completionism,
Gojira.
Baby eventually appears at the Japanese coast while on his way to his birthplace at the Bering Sea. Based on Godzilla's movement, they figure out he must be following his son, so he can be with him in his final moment.
On a straight V deployment. Second team on left flank. Advance on axial 664. Tracker online. Set the V gain to filter RF and...
Check those corners.
Watch your spacing.
Man, don't punch up. Stay loose.
Your transmission's showing a lot of breakups.
Next one down. And proceed on a 216.
Movement! What's the position? Can't lock in. They're closing.
What's happening, A-Pong? Can't see anything in here.
Pull your team out, Gorman.
Talk to me.
Copy.
Pong.
Talk to me, A-Pong!
Gone!
Fall back.
Not so micro anymore, the prehistoric microorganisms revived by the Oxygen Destroyer crawl from out of the tunnels below. Geez, alright, I get it. You don't have to make it any more obvious. When the G-Force brings the big guns to deal with the threat, the monsters combine in one massive creature, a being born from the Oxygen Destroyer.
Destoroyah. Destroyah.
The monster displays immense power. Immeasurable, I would say. So why not bring Godzilla to fight it and see if they don't kill each other? It's the best way of killing Godzilla before he kills everyone else. To do so though, they'll have to bring Junior back to the mainland in order to bait his father into a fight with Destroyah. Miki protests. she's not willing to risk the monster's life like that. Not again, I mean. But this is no time for sentimentalism, says her fellow paranormal Meru Ozawa. The fate of the world is at stake. Reluctant, Miki helps Meru to drive Junior to the front line. The ensuing battle between the two creatures is brutal. The son of Godzilla managed to hold his own surprisingly well against Destroyah, and ultimately finished the monster after throwing it on a refinery. Unfortunately, the battle left a big toll on Junior. Mortally injured, he wanders through Tokyo until finally meeting his father. However, their reunion is interrupted by the reappearance of Destroyah in his ultimate... What is this? Serious? Again? Did you ask an edgy middle schooler to draw Satan and just made a costume out of it? Because that seems to be a recurring design philosophy in the Heisei Era. Destroyah grabs Junior right in front of his dad and fly away with him, dropping the little one at the top of an airport. Godzilla makes a last effort of reviving his son, but is in vain. Junior is dead.
Junior?
In case their plan doesn't work, the G-Force deploys the third iteration of the Super X, piloted by a very familiar face.
これで我々の来年度の予算はゼロだな。来年度があればだが。
The airship is armed with freezing rays that should be able to contain Godzilla's heat and prevent further damage from his meltdown. In theory, at least. Destroyah is a hell of a challenge even for Godzilla, who gets literally wiped on the floor by the other monster. For his adversary's unfortune, however, Godzilla starts to melt down mid-fight. Full of rage and exceeding nuclear energy, the king of the monsters unleashes all his power over the creature, who then tries to flee, only to be frozen by the Super X3, hitting the ground face first in front of... That's how you are going down. No kaiju worthy of its name dies by the hands of the JSDF. Pathetic. As Godzilla continues to melt down, the G-Force shoots everything it has at the creature. The freezing rays do their job, preventing the heat from spreading and causing more damage. The Earth is saved, but the monster remains doomed. Godzilla melts to the bone, leaving this world in a slow and painful manner.
私の役目は終わった。
And that's 2 monsters he killed today, guys. Very impressive. Just to drive home the point of how incompetent was the Super X.
放射のレベルが急激に下がっていく。
The credits play over a montage of clips of Godzilla from the first movie and all the Heisei ones, chronologically. And over that plays a rendition of King Kong vs Godzilla's theme. And I think this is a perfect synthesis of this movie, a wrap of 40 years of Godzilla history. An extremely emotional and dark take on the series and the character, Godzilla vs Destroyah managed to neatly tie together decades of storytelling, resonating the original one's themes of loss and sacrifice in the face of humanity's own hubris. The whole Heisei Era embraced this stance, updating classic themes and settings while not losing sight of what made the series so special in the first place. There are some who say this is the best phase of the franchise and, in all truth, they might be right. The continuity, unlike anything seen anywhere up until that point, elevates a series of movies with top-notch action and plots. which in turn elevated the franchise as a whole in the eyes of a new generation. But all good things must end. Toho's 10-year break would end earlier than expected, as Godzilla entered an experimental phase while trying to remain relevant in a new century. And it all began with the aptly named Godzilla
Aren't you forgetting a little something first?
No, I don't think... Oh. Right. I'm sorry everyone, but it looks like we have to do a little detour before moving on.